Okay,
So anyway, the boat went into, well, I shouldn't say that. It didn't. We went all around Europe. Actually, we uh, went into the Mediterranean. We went to I forgot the name of the town
in Italy,
in Italy. It was
Rome,
no, no,
Sicily,
no, 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 no.
north or south,
It's sort of mid. It was
Pisa, Florence,
starting with N.
Naples.
Naples. No, not Naples. No, no. But anyway, an Italian town, and we went ashore there. That was my first experience of.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a big thing for the crew. They all sort of, when we went ashore to these places, and we went straight down to the red light district.
That's these sailors dragging you along, was it?
I was in their hands. Yeah, I said, and so it was good fun, and we were meeting all these girls.
Did you speak any Italian?
No, I think they didn't have much trouble understanding us. That's my memory. This is all 50 years ago, and they. I can remember we all ended up in this bar. We were in numerous places, but we ended up in this bar. And fortunately, I was still with the officers, who the chief engineer, in fact, was always the engineer of the problem and the solver of the problems, and he. And there was these girls there, and this is a quite attractive girl, and she was sitting on my knee, and we were drinking, and I must say I thought, what the hell, what I didn't think what's going to happen here, and she suddenly jumped up, and there was a young fellow from, we were from our line, whatever that was, I told you,
The Shores of
Shore Saddle, and there was another crowd from Port Line. They're a similar sort of thing, they're sort of brother sister sort of relationship, and there was this young officer, good looking, and she jumped up and she grabbed onto him, and then she took him off, and I remember the last words I heard him saying was, "What have I done to deserve this?" And he disappeared, and
that would have been a terrible blow to your confidence.
not really. I in a way, I thought to myself, God, what have I done? How would you cope with that? And anyway, the chief engineer was there, and he would have said, "No, you're not going anywhere. You're coming back to the boat," because he would have seen so many, similar sort of things, and they disappear, and they don't they don't join the boat in the morning when they're supposed to, or whatever, you know. And anyway, that was my experience there, which was very interesting, very, you know.
Very racy,
very racy, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we and one other memorable night, I suppose, because whenever we were going ashore, I'd sort of hint, well, what about the captain? Oh, don't involve him. He's you know, he's a wet blanket. You don't. And then this one night, it was in Belgium, Antwerp.
Mm-hmm.
And the captain sort of made a particular effort to say, well, you know, he used to call me Doc. Why don't you come ashore with me, Doc? And tonight, I'll show you. You know, I know Antwerp fairly well. And I said, okay, brother, I went ashore with him, and he took he took me to this a bar, restaurant that belonged to a friend of his, and we sort of we sat around drinking there, and we had a fantastic time. You know, I really enjoyed it. He, this dry old captain, who they all said was mad, you know, but as far as I was concerned, he was all right.
He goes and polished off a bottle of spirits every night. Thought he was a bit of a.
They wouldn't involve him.
Yeah, he was too much of a wet.
Well, anyway, I think there was probably a natural thing there that the captain would not involve himself with drinking with subordinates. He might have sort of considered with me, you know, but not with because there's you know I can't cause any trouble, whereas others could cause trouble if.
Not in his chain of command. Makes for a pretty boring old life for the captain.
Yes, it was. And I heard later on the way back, I said, "Oh, what happened to him?" And whether it was true or not, but anyway, they said they took him. That he did go a bit mad, and he had to be taken off the boat. You know. I hope wasn't true, you know, because he's quite a nice fellow, but he was a very stiff, difficult man, you know. So one of the things they used to do was every day, I think, there'd be a meeting between the officers and the captain as to problems with the crew, and there were always problems with the crew. There was always one troublemaker, you know. And I can remember this particular troublemaker. They said he was, you know, they were given their plate and cutlery, and they had to clean it, but they had to wash it and put it back, you know. And this fellow used to just throw it overboard, you know. So they reckoned, bastard, you know. And so the captain said, well, there's only one thing to do with him, we'll bloody put him ashore, you know. He was a troublemaker in other ways too, you know. And so the next port we called in, they just said, no, you're not coming back.
See you, mate.
You're on your own.
Good luck.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
You can just trench someone back in those days.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, he's the captain. He's the boss. It's his kingdom, you know. And so anyway, so we stopped at several ports there, and all of them had their own sort of then we, as I say, the voyage finished in Hull, and I got a train down to London. Arrived in London, got a taxi, and jumped in the taxi and said, he said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "I don't really know, but I've been told Chelsea's got some very nice accommodation." And the taxi driver said to me, "You don't want to go to Chelsea. I'll show you where you want to go." Meaning, things are very expensive in Chelsea, as they were. You know, It was crazy advice that I'd have. You know, Chelsea would be very suitable. And anyway, so he took me to
Beth Green or something.
No, it was Russell Square. Hotel at Russell Square.
Yeah, okay.
Very impressive from the outside hotel, but it was an awful place inside. And it so happened that I was sort of, spent a couple of days there. Got myself somehow or other, I don't know how I did it, but I got somehow or other got myself a job as a, I bought a car, and then got myself a job as a after hours service thing, you know. So what used to happen was I was staying in a hotel. They would ring me in a hotel. It must have been Russell Square, and they would ring me at the hotel and say, "The first place we want you to go is so and so," you know. And I had a little London index thing, map thing, yeah. And I'd go to whatever it was, you know. And then
so you'd be making house calls as a doctor outside of hours.
Okay. After hours, yeah. And then, as I was leaving there, I'd say, "Do you mind if I use your phone?" I'd ring in and say, "I've finished here. Have you got another one for me?" And they'd say, "Yes, the next one is so and so," you know. Or they'd say, "No, haven't got anything. You might as well go back to the hotel and we'll ring you there," you know. Or ring us on the way. And then I'd, so if it was any distance, I'd sort of stop somewhere where I sort of phone box and ring them. And it was quite amazing. I mean, I was driving all around inner London, Leicester Square, where the theatre area was. I was there, you know. And I thought to myself, how the hell did I do it, you know? You have to find your way there. You know, London was bloody difficult. You have to park, and then you have to go and
look through this little map book.
A tiny little book, and I've still got it. And,
you spent a lot of time parked looking at maps, or
yeah?
Did you just
have to stop and say, you know, and fortunately I'm just trying to think. I ran, and then I ran into I was walking around Russell Square, and I ran into a fellow that I'd known, that I'd been to university with in Brisbane, George Zorzi. And I think it was George Zorzi. Zorzi was his name anyway. And he said, "Oh, what are you doing here, you know?" And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just around the corner at London House." And I said, "What's that?" And And London House was a postgraduate accommodation for colonial students. Yeah. And so he told me where it was, and I went around there and said, I'm looking for accommodation. And I had already been called there for one of the students who reckoned he's had something wrong with his heart. And in the middle of the night I went in there and he was, are you sure my heart? He said, yeah. I said, I can't find anything wrong with your heart, I don't believe there's, And of course I didn't really know. You didn't know, you never knew in those days. And so he may have had some sort of arrhythmia thing, but anyway, when I saw him, it was normal rhythm. And somehow or other they, I was able to get in there fairly quickly. And so then I was living there. So I was living in London House for most of the time.
And the idea with you coming to London was to further your education.
Yep.
So how did that? Had you already applied, or did you apply when you got there, or what?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you're really getting things in order, it's hard. But so, to do the postgraduate examination, there was a written examination and then an orals examination. The written examination, I mean, I would have just found out somewhere, and you went along to a big room somewhere and you sat the exam, and I passed. But then, so that was the easy part. That's part one. Part two was the oral examination, where you had to go along and they'd be examined by an examiner, and that wasn't so easy. So while that was going on, I just did locum. You'd get hold of one of the medical magazines, and you'd look up
Positions
work,
vacant.
positions vacant, or whatever, locums, or and so I just went from hospital to hospital, and maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but before I'd left Hobart, I had a reference from Des O'Rourke. I'd written to Des O'Rourke and said, could you send me a...
He was your tutor in Bundaberg.
He was the superintendent in Bundaberg. So he wrote me a reference, which I think he posted to London. And then when I left Hobart Hospital, the superintendent there said, I said, I'll need some sort of reference. And he said, yes, there's a way that we do this, and there's a postgraduate foundation, and I will send your reference to them, and you'll go to them, the postgraduate foundation, to... So how it would work is that you'd go along to this postgraduate foundation, and you'd say, you should have a letter there for me, and then they'd look at it and they'd say, yes, I can see you're highly recommended, and you would be very suited by this job that I'm aware of. That for example, it might be St Bartholomew's Hospital, and they're looking for a registrar, whatever, and And so I went along to see this guy. Very nice fellow. Did me a great service. And he said, yes, I'll just read your reference here. Well, would you excuse me for a minute? And then he left the room. And he left the reference sitting there. So I had a look at it. And what it said was, he's a decent enough fellow. He's, but he's. I don't think he's a very good candidate for college of physicians.
Oh, okay.
And so.
Which is what you were working towards.
Yeah, which is what I got over there for, to become a member of the College of Physicians. And so I had a look at it. Not a very good prospect. And so he came back into the room and he said, I haven't got anything at the moment. But anyway, if you get into any trouble, what my advice to you would be just to, he probably told me where to have a look to find where the jobs were, but he was really saying you're on your own, There's nothing I can do for you. And anyway, I thought that was very interesting. I would love to have, if at any stage the opportunity had presented itself to me to sort of speak to the fellow from Hobart. Really, just to let it, not that I had any bad feeling about it. I think he was right. I wasn't. I used to drink too much, and I wasn't a very good prospect. And I would like to have told him that that's how it worked. That all he did was show me the letter. There's the letter, and. It was all, if he'd given me the letter, he probably would have, knowing that I was going to read it, he probably would have slanted it a bit more to say,
He's
that
good prospect.
He's a good prospect, yeah. Anyway, that was fine. And so, anyway, it's just, and then, there was a job in the papers there for a medical resident in Glasgow Royal Infirmary, and I applied for that, and they said, we'd like to interview you. So I went up on the train, and and I interviewed Professor Stuart Douglas, and he said, you seem fine, yeah, well, you can start, in a couple of weeks or whenever it was, and that was my first big job, and I couldn't have asked for anything better, really. They were a fantastic, Glasgow was a fantastic, and of course and I got a flat in Glasgow, and Suzanne, and I'd been over to see Suzanne in Denmark, and then she sort of came back over to Glasgow. She loved it.
So you two weren't an item, but you were still in contact, or what was the state?
So as far as Suzanne and I was concerned, we had been we were seeing each other every other day, in Hobart. And then, but then Suzanne left Hobart, and as far as I was concerned, I thought I can't count on anything. You know, she could go her own way. She had a boyfriend,
Victor Dawson.
Victor, and I thought Victor was probably the
Victor.
And so when I went to England, to London, I sort of, Suzanne and Joe were in Copenhagen, and so I said, I'd like to come over and see you, you know, so went over, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but anyway. Suzanne booked a car and we went to Foon, an island off Copenhagen, off Denmark, and that was it.
It was back on.
It had changed its nature. It was now, you know, something a bit more than just.
Foon was the place, eh?
Foon. Oh, it's fantastic.
So that's where you fell in love, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We're sleeping in the same bed.
Wow.
Wow. Yes.
That's pretty racy.
Well, up until then, it was, you know, that wasn't.
Yeah. It's funny. I've never heard that Copenhagen Foon was the place.
Yep.
Because that's the real milestone.
It was, and so you know, then I went back to very soon after that I started work in Glasgow, and as soon as Suzanne finished work in Copenhagen, she came to Glasgow. And it was an interesting medical unit in Glasgow. He was a haematologist, was Professor Douglas, and he was very interested in anticoagulation. They had a lot of haemophiliacs in Scotland, and so they had set up these units all over Scotland. You know, I don't know how many there were. Let's say there were 6 of them or something. You know, and Professor Douglas and his team would staff these units, and so that, you know, once every month or so, you know, they'd go around to these units and just check on everybody, make sure they're all right, did what blood tests they had to do, and, you know, this sort of thing, you know. And so that was his prime interest, running the haemophiliac service, you know, in Scotland. And but he was also interested in thrombolysis. So somebody had a thrombolytic sort of thing, you know, because they bleed, you know, like haemophiliacs. So he used to go to Kenya, set up a medical unit in Kenya, you know, a proper, you know, there was an arrangement between him and the medical staff at the hospital in Kenya. They wanted someone, you know, to set up a proper medical unit, and he did that, So this is coping with all sorts of medical sort of problems. But his special interest was in snakebite. So there was plenty of snakebite in Kenya. And the snakebite, the interest there was the thrombolysis. That they bite you and they inject a substance into you that will dissolve any clotting that you've got. And so if you're bleeding, you won't stop bleeding, because of the because of thrombolysis. And so he was very big in setting that up. Now, where else it was occurring, I don't know. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, they were leaders, I think, and then that led to when people had coronary occlusions, what they knew was that there was clotting occurring in arteries, and the treatment to this day is, if you can get somebody early enough with a clot, not so much in hearts now, but with strokes, for example, if you inject a thrombolysis to dissolve the clot. So I mean, it's turned out to be very big, It was very important from a heart point of view initially, but then they sort of changed over to
stroke.
Well, from the heart point of view, more important was putting in stents, and anyway, that had all very big ramifications, which of course I didn't have a clue of about at the time. I wasn't working in there, that sort of thing. I was working in my job was, and I thought it was a fantastic system they had, that they were a haematology unit essentially. That was their main interest, but the 1 day a week they would take admissions, whatever admission came in that day, they would go into their ward, and they would look after those patients. And my job was to admit them and look after them, and prepare everything for Professor Douglas. He used to come around, and I'd sort of see the patient, admit them, and say, "This is what I think," and he'd come around and say, "Well, that's right. This is what we'll do." And
so he was a mentor to you at that stage. He was educating you.
I certainly learnt a lot from him. Yeah. And I didn't warm to him. He was a very cold sort of fellow. But I realised, I was bloody wet behind the ears. He was a fantastic fellow. The more I think of it now. No ego.
Yeah.
It was all solid. This is what decent. What needs to be done, And and that's how I found the Scots. Actually, they were British are very showy. London very showy medicine.
Yeah.
Whereas in Glasgow it was
just a matter of fact.
let's get what's the reality here,
And so that's the sort of approach that you've adopted.
I would never brag.
Certainly in your
I never achieved what they did,
So we're getting into your career now. Like while you were at Glasgow, did you have any interesting patients? Any memorable patients that still?
Memorable patients. I suppose, there'd have to be them there, but I can't remember. I can remember the one thing that did stand out was one of the physicians in the ward, Dr. Perry. He was an endocrinologist, and he sent a patient in saying that he thought the patient had Addison's disease. He thought that there was something wrong with his adrenals, and then I admitted the patient, so I examined her, and then so he'd sent it in saying, please admit with Addison's disease, and then I'd written down PD, thyrotoxicosis, thyroid problem, and that sort of really did impress Professor Douglas. So that sort of,
that you disagreed with the...
That I'd said, no, I don't think this, I think it's, something else. And he sort of said to me, how did you know that? So that's how I remember that, because it was but there would have been other things too. I mean, there were all sorts of... There was one thing there, interesting experience there. They were working on factor VIII, which is the factor that is deficient in haemophilia. And they were trying to show that if you gave somebody a certain drug and then exercised them, that you could boost the production of factor VIII. Something like that. A bit remote, you'd say, but anyway. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to do that, because they're going to inject you with this substance, this drug. And I thought, I'm not too keen on that. I don't know too much about it. And they said, all in the course of science, it's very important, and we'll get a paper out of this. And I finally gave in. And so what I had to do was, first of all, they had to exercise me, and then what they knew was that exercise boosted the production of factor VIII. So they exercised me and measured my factor VIII. Yep, it went up. And then the second part of the experiment was they gave you the injection, exercised you, and seeing if the injection inhibited or increased the production of factor VIII. I've forgotten what the exact thing was. But anyway, as far as I was concerned, they injected you with the stuff and then they exercised you. I felt terrible. I really felt as I mean, the people who were conducting the exercise tests were almost laughing at me, because I was so bloody pathetic, I felt terrible, and I could hardly run, and they, let's say the results they were getting was this stuff was suppressing the production of factor VIII, and in my case it was the reverse. It increased the production of, and they sort of they had to try and explain this, this because all the results showed the same thing except for this. But what I knew was it had the most profound, awful effect on me, But they seemed to be terribly interested in that. But they couldn't explain it, so they just said, he was very anxious about having and this might explain why. Well, I wasn't anxious because I didn't want to do it, but it did make me anxious. But I felt terrible. That particular night, you know Sally?
Yeah.
She lived in the flat.
So this is when you became friends with Sally?
Yeah, yeah. Professor Douglas had said to me, "Where are you staying?" You know, when I arrived there, and I said, "Oh, I'm staying at the Railway Hotel." You know, the Royal Hotel or something like that. You know, railway place. And he said, "Oh, you can't stay there." You know. Aziz, who works in the lab, he's got a flat somewhere, and I think he might sort of be able to help you. So he came and saw me, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's Alistair and Sally."
Yeah.
Alistair has got a flat.
Right.
And so then I went to see Alistair, and he said, "Oh, fine," you know. And he didn't seem to mind that Suzanne was coming, so I thought they'd all say, "Oh God, you can't do that." But so what was I saying? So Alistair and Sally. So the night, the night that evening after the experiment went bloody haywire, I went to Alice. Sally did a Scottish haggis.
Okay.
For us, and she said, "There's only one way to eat haggis, and that is to have whiskey with it." So I had haggis and whiskey, and then I promptly vomited, which I blamed on the experiment.
It's a pretty wicked combination.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd actually gone to the UK to join the Royal College of Physicians?
So there were the member MRCP, member of the Royal College of Physicians, MRCP, and then it was MRCP London, MRCP Glasgow, MRCP Edinburgh.
Right.
And and the exams are conducted in those areas, you know. And I had a few goes at the MRCP London and failed for stupid reasons, you know.
So when you say you'd had a go, like you did the exam?
You did the exam. These are the oral exams. You turn up and, you know, somebody would sort of take you around, show you cases and then question you about them.
And just...
To this day, I don't know what was wrong with some of those people, you know.
Mm.
And I'd love to know.
They never tell you? That's so frustrating.
No, they wouldn't tell you because they're going to show them again to somebody else, you know. And I suppose, really, if I talk sensibly about them rather than bloody sort of thinking I have to know, so guessing, you know, I
would be more
I would have done
interested in
better.
your thought process rather than your... If you
getting it
approach.
wrong. Yeah. Anyway, I went to a series of lectures by a fellow called Papworth, who was famous in London, well known in London, for his series of lectures here. So he used to give a 3-hour lecture on how to sort of how to pass the exams, essentially.
Okay.
And you know, then I think there might have been 10 lectures. So it's a hell of a lot of learning there. Couldn't have been 3 hours. But anyway, he was the most interesting fellow. Another fellow that you'll never forget, you know. Because he used to say, he used to tell jokes. He used to sort of, he'd say to himself, oh, they're getting a bit sleepy, I'll liven them up, you know, and he was like that, you know. He was a fantastic lecturer, and it was just very interesting to go to him to sort of see what good lecturing is, because a lot of the people who used to teach tied up with the MRCPs, you know, the Royal College of Physicians. A lot of the lecturers involved in that were terrible. They had no idea how to sort of, you know, to lecture, how to make things interesting. They were as dull as dishwater, you know. Whereas Papworth was, he was a dynamo. They hated him, you know, from the colleges. They thought he was a bloody troublemaker, but they were wrong.
Yeah.
He was the real deal, and so he used to. He had rooms on Harley Street, and so people used to send him patients there. I don't know if they sent him any patients, but he would. Then he would sort of have these lectures. He'd have a room somewhere, and we'd all go to this room. And as we walked in, he'd say, "That'll be £3 for you, £3, you know." And you give him your money, and you sit down, and away he'd go. And and he just had a natural ability. And most of the guys who were involved in teaching at the medical schools there were in research. And so they were all very solid in their research. They knew what they were doing, but they could not teach. That was my feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And whereas Papworth wasn't interested in research, he was interested in teaching. And he had all sorts of ways of looking at things, all sorts of different ways of looking at things. Anyway.
So he was a teacher just for the MRCP entry.
Essentially.
But it was, what he's actually teaching there is diagnostic, like relevant to medicine.
Yeah, diagnostics. Wrote a book, I've still got the book there, Papworth's Primer of Medicine.
Is that a famous book, is it?
To me it was.
Yeah, okay. So, and does the
But
story...
a lot of people would have had nothing but contempt for him. Oh, he's nothing, he's what's he ever done? You know, and what he'd done is he was an excellent teacher.
And so did you then resit the...
Yep. And so what they did, I sat it in London twice, failed it, and the third time they said, you'll have to go somewhere else, and they sent me to Glasgow. And who should be the examiner but Professor...
Yeah.
Professor Stuart Douglas. And everything went very well. And it was all just good sense, you know.
So
rather than having these mystery cases, I mean, the guy who had some sort of exotic bloody neurological bloody problem that was very difficult to work out what the hell was wrong with him, you know. He had, he'd have all these, whether he had syphilis or whatever, you know. And I mean, I know it was stupid. I sort of said, oh, is it syphilis? Something like that.
So the idea is that they take you and they show you these are real patients that are in whenever you go for the...
They're sitting there, you're going around one to the other and you're looking at them. And,
so you can just get unlucky and they're just really difficult cases.
Oh, yeah. And other ones that it was just so silly, the thing. For example, there was a woman there who had emphysema, common old emphysema, you know, and she'd been taking steroids, and the steroids had affected her skin. And what they were really interested in, they said, well, what's wrong with her? And they showed me, what's wrong with the skin? And, you know, they looked at the skin and it was, and I started thinking of all these rarefied bloody sort of skin sort of conditions, and it was ridiculous. All I had to do was just stand back and say, no, wait on, just look, what's wrong with this woman? She's obviously got some sort of asthma, emphysema thing, and as likely as not she's on steroids, and you know, and if they ask me about her skin, well, that's what's affecting her skin, you know. But anyway, almost I'd look back and say, how could I have been so stupid? But anyway, that's what happens.
Yeah. That's interesting. All right, so that's your time in Scotland. So you did get admitted to the...
Yep, they pulled us all into a room and said, you know, now you've all been awarded the, you've got the MRCP, and we now call it, you know, you've got it at Glasgow, so MRCP Glasgow, but now we're changing the terminology, and it's going to be MRCP UK. So, you know, they united all the colleges, so Edinburgh, Glasgow, London, MRCP UK, and the structure has changed, and that if once you've got the MRCP UK, you then have to do 2 years in a specialty, and then you can practice in that specialty. And you in Australia, you'll have to you will have to sit another exam, but you'll have to spend 2 years in a specialty, then you'll do a special exam, you know. And I sort of said, oh, I'm sick of this. And I didn't pursue that. So I would have had to have got a job as a specialist somewhere, you know.
So does that mean, so you have the title of?
Oh, I've still got I've still got MRCP UK, but I'm not a registered specialist.
Yeah.
You have to work in that specialty, which is only right. It's but anyway, that's.
So was it that stage that you decided to come back to Australia?
Well, I probably would have stayed on and done, you know, some specialty thing, you know. But Suzanne wanted to come home, and Mitty was the more pressing things there. So I said, oh, well, I'll go home.
Okay. And so Mum and you at that stage, were you engaged or?
We got married soon after I got back.
So let's touch on how you asked Mum to marry you. Was there any situation around that?
I think it was just a sort of understanding. We'd get married. We'd been living together for...
Very romantic. So you didn't
There's nothing on
Did
the
you go
knees.
down on one
no,
knee?
no knee, no.
read a poetry,
No.
candlelit night,
Ring. No.
the ring in the champagne
No,
flute?
no.
Just an understanding. Okay.
Your mother had a fair bit of say in it.
Yeah. So you had decided that you were going to get married, and so you came back to Australia, Sydney. Sydney was because Mitty was here.
Yep.
And so you lived in Cronulla first? Where did you come back and live when you came back from the UK?
Bondi.
Bondi.
I got a job at as the clinical superintendent at St Vincent's Hospital, and which was a glorified title for somebody that they wanted to. There were people ringing up all the time saying they wanted to have a patient admitted to hospital, and they wanted someone to take those calls and decide whether or not they were appropriate to come into St Vincent's, you know.
Mm.
And that's what I was doing.
Okay.
And it was more that there was a superintendent there and a deputy superintendent, and they said that they didn't have time to sort of, you know, do that, you know.
Mm.
So they had other jobs. And so I did that for a year.
Okay. We'll just make another break here, Dad.